What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today, well, actually, about a couple weeks ago at this point, I think, give or take, lots gone on since, I exploded my NAS server. Yeah. Let's talk about it. Alrighty, so I think with any type of intro like that bars a bit of story time, so I'm going to try to keep it brief to keep you guys hopefully watching this video. Well, I'll take it a little further back, actually. So a video that I still have not yet to publish because of my recent issues. A lot of my stuff is on my NAS server that I use for video publications, which also, you know, might make me forced to do some type of other backup solution. That's neither here or there, and I'm digressing, but I was recording that video and kept having some power interruptions. And as you can see, power's good. So we'll get into that later. But normally, typically under my normal studio, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 3 lights above me, there's a light behind me and 2 other off to the side. So I've got a fair amount of lights going. However, they're not super high draw lights either. They typically don't really put out a ton of power or require a ton of power. And I generally just have typical stuff like my networking things running. So I was losing power just by recording doing this. And I've had some of those issues in the past, and I should have really looked more into it in the past and maybe put 2 and 2 together, and it probably was more of just my pure laziness. But I lost power probably 3 times during that video and just kept flipping my breaker back on. So my breaker was tripping, right? So there's kind of item number 1. So then where and why is what does that have to do with my NAS server? Well, so a couple weeks later, or not even a week later, around, just a few days later, I think at this point, it's all kind of, with the holidays and everything, my brain is mush. I'm just working out of my studio here. I actually also double this as my work office for my real-time job. This is not my full-time job, unfortunately. And just plucking away at the keyboard, doing some work tasks, and bam, I lose power. I don't have these lights on all the time. Like, this is for YouTube. So generally just running a laptop, like the draw of power from a laptop and just my networking stuff, which is super, super low power draw. And I lose power. I'm like, now that's weird, because what I was doing before, yeah, a little higher power draw with all the lights and stuff. Okay, what the heck? And so, in typical fashion, I go out to my garage and I flip the breaker back on, because I needed to get back to work. I was in the middle of stuff. I actually just joined a call and lost power, so that wasn't good. And it stayed stable for a little bit, and then I lost it probably 20, 30 minutes later. And I'm like, okay, this is something else is going on here. And for some reason, in my infinite wisdom, I decided it's got to be my UPS. I don't know why I thought that. Please, save me some grace here. But I thought for sure my UPS was faulty. Now, UPSs can surge in terms of, like, if the battery is running out or going bad, trying to cycle that power up in the UPS and actually charge up the battery. And my particular UPS, I've actually already replaced the battery, so I thought something was going on with that again. That's, I guess, why I leaned towards that, right? So again, I'm trying to sum up the story here. At that point, I was like, all right, let me just take off my essentials off the UPS, basically unplug the UPS. Then I actually completely unplugged the UPS, and I needed to get my networking gear back online, needed power. And the NAS server typically always is just running, which I can see from here. There's a lot of dust in it, but it's typically always running. It's a very low power draw system too. When not even accessing the drives actually spin down. So that's a really good thing with this. So I'm just running very small power on, like, I think it draws on average like 60 to 80 watts in a normal non-functional day. And I wasn't really using it. So I guess I technically didn't need to plug it back in. But anyway, summing up where I'm heading here. I plug in everything. I need to get back to work. I wasn't worried about like YouTube stuff at this point. I just need to work. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to plug in my NAS. So I basically went and grabbed just a power strip, generic trip light power strip that I've had forever, and plugged in all my networking gear. It started to come online. I'm like, okay, that's good. Everything's staying up. My lights are on. Well, just the overhead fan light. And then went to plug in this guy. And as soon as I did, and I hear a loud snap, crackle, big pop, lots of pops. Not the ones that you get in your cereal.
Hear that? It's snap and pop.
And crackle?
And crackle.
the bad electrical explosions, basically. And that's why I'm saying I might have exploded my NAS server. So that scared the absolute crap out of me. I yank the power strip off the receptacle, off the power outlet, pull everything off. And I'm thinking, my God, what the heck just happened? So at that point, right, I knew for sure it wasn't my UPS that for some reason I decided I was going to say was the problem, and the power breakers had been flipping. So naturally, I went out to my garage and checked out the power breakers and found me a site that was not good. I'm gonna put some pictures up on screen so that way you guys can see them. But when I first went out there to discover it, the breaker was already tripped at this point. And actually the breaker sometimes would not trip back or flip back on. I'd have to wait for a second and then flip it back on. And through doing that, I noticed it was extremely hot to the touch. I don't know exactly how hot. I wish I should have taken my laser thermometer out there to see, but it was hot where if you left your finger on it, you would maybe, I don't know if you get burned, but it was very hot to the touch. And I could also hear a buzzing noise. So on top of that, as you see in the pictures, there was some carnage that already had happened. Wire had melted away and things were not good. So I actually got to talking with my YouTube think tank buddies, Joe from Pinky Tech and John from the Net Guy Reviews. And John's actually really good with electrical stuff, at least way better than me. And he gave me some pointers and he said, basically, it sounds like it's a melting or a loose connection breaker. And you're basically overamping because of the poor connection to your studio. And what happened here with the server, I guess, was the weakest link in the chain, and it took the brunt of the over amperage. So my guess here is, from what I heard, we'll get into it, I bet I've got some popped capacitors, at least in the power supply. I don't see any carnage in the motherboard space or any of the small capacitors that run the backplane power for the actual hard drive cages. I'm hoping the hard drives are fine at this point, because I can replace motherboard and CPU, but losing data is my most critical worry at this point. So where does that lead us here now that I've told my story? Hopefully you guys found it entertaining and haven't already clicked away. I've obviously got power working back in this room. I've got all my studio lights running. I've got my editing PC running. My laptop's plugged into the wall, and I've got all this stuff behind me that's powering. So I've fixed the breaker, but we'll get into that as I have some vloggy style video to show you guys at the end there of how I actually fixed the issue, or I'm hoping it's a permanent fix. But my main thing here is I want to take you guys through, and I've waited to do this mainly because I need this thing to produce videos. So if you're seeing this now, then well, maybe I've got this fixed or I've somehow scrapped together a way to get this video out. But I'm mainly concerned about the power supply and the carnage that I may discover here. So we're gonna go through that real quick, and then we'll flip into the vloggy kind of video of me going through and showing off, what happened with my breaker, the melted wires, all that fun stuff, and then basically conclude. All right, first things first, I thought as I was doing this to take a look at the 24 pin, like all the major power connectors, just to see if we see any kind of carnage or burnt ends or anything like that. Again, the PC wasn't plugged on, so I didn't really expect much of this. See in here, this is the CPU power. Everything looks pretty good there. I'm looking up top. Everything looks good there, so I think we're okay so far. I guess next here, I need to get the power supply free, but I need to unplug all these SATA power connectors for the hard drives. Luckily, there isn't too many of them. All right, should be able to just lift this guy out. There we go. And to give myself, hopefully, maybe a little bit of grace here, feel free to roast me, guys. I'm not sure if the BAs are actually on a more better tier ranking than most EVGAs. EVGA does make some great power supplies. My idea, I think 4 or 5 years ago when I built this server was, oh, it's just a low power draw system. This should be fine. So again, if this is a not so good power supply, then I'm gonna make sure, if it's dead, which I'm assuming it is before opening it up here, that we get a better quality one in there. So let's open this guy up and see what we can see. Now, I definitely 100%, 1,000,000,000% do not condone opening up power supplies just because it's dangerous. Do at your own risk. I'm not condoning to do that. I need to know the extent of the damage to find out, is it okay to try to power this thing back on, et cetera, et cetera. So I have not tried to power the system back on since the pops that I heard. I figured it's probably not good to try to do that, after hearing that kind of noise. All right, what do we got? I was actually possibly expecting more damage. I'm looking for, yeah, I thought for sure I'd see like the big old capacitor right there, like blown up. But based on what I heard for sure, I'm just looking around, seeing in here, see if I can get some better light on this thing. Pop on my cell phone light, looking for like blown capacitors, any kind of power leads that are broken or blown or disconnected or something. Doesn't necessarily mean that something can fail and not be visible, because we've been through that before. I could put it on my power supply tester. In fact, let's do that real quick. All right, my power supply tester connected up. UPS, CPU power here. And this power supply does have a PCIe. So go ahead and just test that rail of power as well, even though I wasn't really using it in my system. All right, so we got the main connections connected up on my power supply tester. Flip it over to this side. All right, so 24 pin, 8 pin, 6 pin for all the major connections. And ideally, so this thing doesn't ignite, moment of truth here. Gonna get a cable that I have back here to test the power supply. Okay, it's plugged in. I'm gonna kind of stand back a little just to be safe. It's got nothing. Yeah. Wow. So usually, I'm just making sure, yeah, I'm powered in with power. Plugged in with power. This will give me some type of indicator of something like being wrong with it, not getting a proper read across the rails, or, you know, because it tests the 12 volt rail, the 3.3 and the 5. Those are for all the major connections, and this power supply is completely toast. Yeah, it's plugged all the way in too. Okay, well, that at least tells us that my theory of the power supply being roasted, although not visibly very roasted, I would have to say, yeah, is our problem. Well, wasn't necessarily the problem for my power circuit issue, which we'll get into, but is hopefully the only problem with my NAS server. Alrighty, and for reference, before we cut into the circuit panel, or my breaker panel carnage, that was the original cause of this power supply exploding. I just want to show you what a real test looks like on a good working power supply. So I've got a 850 watt Antec Neo Ecotech. It's a tier A power supply. I'm just gonna flip the power switch. That's what we're supposed to be getting. So this is what we want to see with a good power supply when you flip the power switch. So again, power switch off. Immediately it's going to lose power because the power connections are ran through it, and it immediately gets power. So we didn't even get that with my exploded power supply. So hopefully the only thing that is exploded, I am crossing my fingers, so cross with me, because at this point, I don't even know at the time of filming this if my server is alive. So I think what I'll do is I'll go back through and maybe just connect this power supply just to see if the thing comes alive. But let's cut into that circuit panel, the breaker panel, and show you guys, well, my carnage, as we saw a little bit of it already, and the repair work that I did. All right, so this is my breaker that's got the really bad wire. Try to focus here. Hard to do. Rubber gloves on. There we go. So that is tripping stuff in my studio pretty bad. Actually, I think I just had a wire that popped out. Wow. Yep. So not good. And that's typically indicative of, I've got another bad one here too. At least from the research I've done, that the connection is not tight enough, and it eventually works its way out from heat expansion and not being fully torqued down, and then you have this type of problem. So not good at all. And here's another look. So this wire basically worked itself out the back of the breaker, and just by me removing the breaker, so not good. So my theory holds of the connection basically barely maintaining itself whatsoever. So That's my problem. All right, one other look at this now that I've got it kind of almost out. It's still got the GFI connection, which should just be able to loosen that screw, but these wires are toast, at least on those ends. But when I went to undo this screw, I only gave it maybe a quarter of a turn and the wire just came right out. So these are supposed to be rated for, let's see if it says here, 36 inch-pounds. There's no way this thing had 36 inch-pounds on it. So now that makes me wonder how many more are loose. So I'm gonna get me a torque screwdriver and torque all my connections down to 36 inch-pounds. Crazy. Home builders just really cut corners. It's only like a 10-year-old home. All right. So I'm actually replacing two breakers because I actually had the same problem occurring for another circuit in my house, and I noticed the wires were damaged just a little bit. Not as bad as those other ones, but here we go. So we got the wires nicely stripped back, looking good. New breaker ready to go in, and like I said, I already attached this one, which was the main problem one. Got those wires snug down. I actually didn't have a torque screwdriver that I could find at Home Depot. I guess a pretty tough thing to find, but I hammered that down as far as torque, probably more than it needed. Hopefully, you know, it didn't go too crazy on it, but yeah, I need things up and running so I can make some content and have some power in my house, because now I've got two dead circuits, and yeah, you get this fixed. So we're gonna get this guy in here. Pretty hard to film this, but I will show the after once I'm done. All right, I am rapidly losing daylight, but I'm done. I at least hope so. So we've got this breaker replaced and this one. So we're gonna flip that to the on position, this one to the on position. This one was the one that was running my studio that was having issues. This is one that started having issues, and I noticed wire corrosion and stuff like that. So everything looks good, and those things are hopefully as tight as they need to be. And yeah, all that's left to do is hit my main principal. That sucker is really on there. There we go. Lights just came on in my garage, so that's a little bit more helpful for seeing this. So moment of truth is I'm gonna have to kind of benchmark my power draw, because as soon as I would kind of like even hit my PC with a heavy load, this one would flip. So even though there's only just one PC, shouldn't have been doing that, even on a 15 amp. We'll see what happens. It's alive, and man, I dodged a bullet. At least I hope I did. We just only got the power supply from original testing, a good power supply. I'm gonna get this out of the way. So the one that I just put off to the side here, that my Antec power supply, just to kind of plug everything in, make sure it works. So most stuff is not plugged in. Like I don't have any of the drives plugged in just because that takes a lot of time to really fish through all that. But as you saw there, it was booting into the Unraid OS. So everything seemingly is doing pretty good. So at this point, I've got a couple things I want to say. Do as I say, not as I do. I definitely sat on that bad breaker way too long. If you're experiencing something like that, don't keep flipping the breaker back and hope for the best. Something is wrong. And at first it didn't appear wrong, or there was no issue that I could visibly see. So that's why I was kind of flipping breakers back. I do tend to draw a lot of power in this room, although not a crazy excessive amount. It's not like I'm running crypto miners or something like that. Yeah, I definitely had flipped it before, and wasn't until nearly destroying my NAS server that I found out, ooh, I've actually got some damage in my circuit panel. And a note from that, because I did some research on, you know, what is the cause of something like that. Found some electrician's video, which I'll link in my video. This guy had a fantastic video, and he basically had the same exact problem that I had, which was a melted wire, loose wires, which as we saw when I pulled out the breaker, one of them just slipped right out. It wasn't even basically torqued down at all, and was basically starting to melt down the breaker. Yeah, so I got to a point where the breaker wasn't delivering the amperage properly, and yeah, it can definitely take some stuff with it if you know, if it is that bad, which mine was. So be aware of that. And yeah, don't plug in things, you know, knowing that there's something wrong. That was a mistake I made, and I'm lucky I didn't eat it too bad. I basically just need to get a replacement power supply, and should be, hopefully, you know, get my drives all connected up good and back up, which if you're seeing this video, that means the NAS server is pretty much functioning in full capacity, because it's got, like I said, a lot of my video templates. It's got a lot of music on it that I usually add to my videos, etc. So that would be telltale sign that everything is a-okay. So thanks for tuning into this one though, guys. I appreciate your time, and hopefully you learned something about, you know, home electricity and breaker stuff. I'm not an electrician, so please don't use my video as raw example of what to do when you're in these situations. I just simply encountered this and wanted to share my story because it's been a little bit since I posted a video, and this is partly due to that. So thanks for tuning in. Like I said, appreciate your time, and I'll catch you in the next one. And hopefully no more broken hardware. I hope not. Oh, actually, one more broken hardware. But that's a 3090 that I said I'd repair that, you know, is not mine and should be okay. I hope.